Hi, this is my review of Night Journey of the Soul, a Gothic adventure gamebook. This is an adventure that you can play solo or with 2 or more people, although I would recommend that you play this book with just 1 or 2 people because otherwise the experience is going to be too watered down, in my opinion. It's not going to make too much sense with some of the encounters and the background either. This is a vampire killing sort of story. I think that the cover is accidentally or unintentionally misleading, because it looks like an 80s film, like a B-horror movie type of experience, but it's more like Dungeons and Dragons Pathfinder with a modern twist. You play in the 1930s, but there are a lot of weird science elements and devices, but a lot of fantasy species and races and sensibilities. I think I would have preferred it if this was more like 1930s semi-realistic, but this is based on the Radiance campaign setting. It's a free to download book. I'm going to put a link in the description below. It's actually one of the worst PDFs that I have seen because it's so heavy. It takes so long to load each page as you are scrolling up and down the PDF. So it's quite a nightmare to try to navigate your way through the Radiance book. I'm still going to put the link in the description. Maybe you have a really good computer that can process the pages real fast, but I would prefer it if they were to optimize or improve the PDF later on, because it actually looks like quite the interesting setting with a lot of weird science and some different races and classes and species that you can select. So I recommend that you check it out if you can stand the loading times. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. My major criticism is that there are several typos, a lot of typos throughout the entire book. And there are also some descriptions that are not well laid out. I had a somewhat difficult time to picture each encounter, locations, the scenes, because the description is somewhat lacking. It's not like other adventure game books that I have played or other solo adventures. But the organization is pretty good. That is, you have bookmarks on the side so you can get to any of the scenes. You basically have a space on your character sheet where you can write down the scene, and the bookmarks will take you to that scene. The writing, despite what I told you that the description is somewhat lacking and the errors, it's pretty decent. So I don't think you will have too much trouble at all understanding most of the encounters. Although in some encounters where there aren't too many details that you will need to analyze or look into to figure out the correct solution, I think you will have to read the paragraphs twice perhaps to get a better picture. So that doesn't make for smooth gameplay. Now let's talk about the contents, and this is going to be a spoiler-free review. You will be able to play this gamebook without having any of the plot twists or secrets ruined for you. This is a standalone type of book. You only need this book and a 20-sided die and a 6-sided die to play. The 20-sided die is going to be used for checks and attack rolls, but if you do not have a 20-sided die, you could also roll 3 standard dice and total the results, but it's much better to have your d20. And the 6-sided die is going to be used for example, to determine your hit points when you are taking a healing potion. Because in this game you have 2 stats that determine your survivability. You have sanity and vitality. Vitality is usually drained or lowered down depending on the attack depending on different hazards or different forms of attacks that the enemies are using against you. But vitality is also like the sanity. You also need to keep track of that and to keep it up as much as possible, because there are different effects that will drain your sanity, and you only have 10 points of sanity, so it's quite fragile. If those points get to 0, you are insane and it's game over. But when it comes to your vitality, you have 30 points of vitality, and you also have a ghost dog. That has to do with your character's background. So if you reach 0 points of vitality, your dog will be able to help you in a limited way to get up once more, but you have a limited number of times as to when the dog can do this. Besides that, you have to determine your character's stats, which are quite simple. You have brawn, agility, faith, endurance, intellect, and charm. So you basically circle 2 of these stats. Maybe you want your character to be quite agile, but also charming. That's going to be like your specialization, a charming and agile character. But you could perhaps choose faith or brawn or endurance, intellect. So it's going to make it easier on certain checks. The book said that they are balanced, that is, that the entire adventure is not going to have a preference for a character that is focused on brawn or charm or intellect, but I think that there are some stats that are more useful than others. I'm not going to say which ones because that could ruin the adventure for you, but in any check related to that particular stat or gifts, as they are called here, you're going to get a +3 bonus on your roll. You also have to keep track of coins of treasure because that's a secondary objective of the adventure. Your main objective is going to be to kill vampires, to eliminate a vampire threat, but your secondary objective is getting money to send your niece to a sort of magical college. That's why I told you that there are a lot of fantasy elements in this game book. You also have information on expendable gear such as healing potions, a flask of wine to recover your sanity. You also have a lucky charm it gives you a bonus on your d20 roll. You can only use it once, and your healing potions and wine flask as well. Well, the wine flask actually has 6 uses. You also have, like I told you, the different goals that you need to carry out. I think it's somewhat unnecessary to have them listed on this character sheet because they aren't that important. That is, it's not like you're going to. Well, perhaps if you're a completionist, maybe you will want to keep track of all the goals, but a lot of them just happen as you keep moving forward almost automatically. I really like it how the character sheet includes a space to write your current scene so that you do not lose track of where you are. Now, how do you play this book? This is very different from other adventure game books. It plays a lot more like a novel. You're basically reading through different scenes or chapters, and after describing a scene, they tell you what you wish to do to carry out an attack or to perform a ceremony or something like that, and you make a roll with a bonus if you pick the correct choice. Sometimes there is more than one correct answer. You have multiple choices, but other times, yes, you're not going to get that bonus if you do not pick the right choice, and in other occasions, if you pick a wrong option, it can actually result in a penalty. So that's how you're going to play this book. You can play it with more than 2 people, like I told you, 2 or 3 or even 4. But if you play with more than 1, your investigator is supposed to be a rookie investigator. That is, let's say if you play with 2 people, there are going to be a couple of rookie investigators. But if you play with just 1 person, you're going to be a veteran. And that makes no sense with the background story, because the main character is supposed to be this sort of like a grizzled, hard-boiled occultist investigator sort. And if you're playing with 2 or more, that doesn't make too much sense that they have the same past, or that they have to divide the different details of the character's past between the different player characters. I think this is actually one of the things that I didn't like about the story, is that the book doesn't decide or sets itself as a comedy, a horror comedy, or a more moody, serious adventure. Because there are some things, for example, when it comes to the character's background, that I don't want to spoil. It feels so serious, so moody, quite tragic. It feels a bit like Constantine with any other sort of detective character that has a lot of sad events to his life, even when he was very young. It's a story of a character who is carrying on, continuing the fight despite so many losses that he suffered. He's also an alcoholic, or is trying to get rid of that addiction. So it's that sort of character, and I think that's really cool for the type of adventure that it is playing. But there are some other moments that things result in in such a ridiculous fashion. Now, like I told you, you can play with 2 or more people. The two people could be junior or rookie investigators. But let's say they want to play with 3 people or 4. You could also play with junior investigators in the case of 3 people. But if you are playing with a 4th person, that 4th person is going to be kind of like the game master, reading the book, making some rolls, etc. So I think that the 4th player will be left out. This game is definitely, this adventure game book is better played with just 1 or 2 people, in my opinion. Now let's talk about the adventure itself. The adventure focuses a lot on your character getting modifiers. There aren't too many paths that you can take. Near the second half, you do have some options that you can go to that corridor, through that room, you can go back to a certain area, but for the most part it's going to be quite linear or on rails, and they just tell you, oh, you're reaching this place and it's locked in a certain way. What are you going to do? Are you going to try to bash the door in, or are you going to try to lockpick, or are you going to... So it tells you things like that, and you make your choice. Usually you're going to pick a choice that has to do with your gifts or attributes that I told you, like brawn, intellect. But even if you pick a choice based on one of your attributes, the correct choice is always going to be the one that gives you the bonus for that. Now your character, because you are sort of occultist sort of investigator or detective, he's going to be performing different like spirit bindings and ceremonies, and you will have the help of different entities, and sometimes you can sacrifice a bit of your vitality to receive the aid of one of these spirits. Sometimes that aid really is convenient for you, because it not only gives you a bonus when you are making a check, other times it gives you an additional advantage in other situations. So I always took the option of using the spirit for some task, but it's all up to you. I think you can also do it without asking for help all the time from these entities. But I think that's one of the things that I didn't enjoy too much of this book, that you do not have too many choices as to what you want to do. It's more like you're already in this situation, and depending on what you choose, you're going to get a bonus, and that's it. So you have to play this game book expecting more of a simplified experience. If you want to play something like fighting fantasy, like the fighting fantasy game books, or Tunnels and Trolls, even though it's not the same thing, in those cases there are a lot of twists and turns and options and puzzles, but here it's more about the checks, making the roll, getting your modifier because of the choice that you picked, and that's it. I also really didn't like it, how I told you that the experience is neither serious nor comedic, and there are some very ridiculous moments that really broke the immersion. I was so into it at first. The first 3 or 4 scenes, it felt so cool. I imagined everything in such a moody and exciting way, and the fights, the way that you are moving through all of those Gothic places, because this is an adventure that features vampire hunting. You can expect places in the wilderness, graveyards, a church. So in that regard, it's quite great. But then I don't know how to describe this creature without spoiling things, I think I'm going to make something up. This doesn't happen in the book. Imagine that there is a flesh golem made out of dwarven parts of different dwarven bodies. It's basically like a dwarf flesh golem. That would normally be it, a dwarf flesh golem, no? Or whatever you want to call it in a somewhat serious way in a fantasy setting. But here, if such a thing were to exist, they would probably call it Dwarvenstein. So those sorts of things really fit an action comedy type of experience like Tunnels and Trolls, or in a war game sort of way, Flintlock. But here, this book combines some very serious and moody things and horrifying things with these comedic elements. It doesn't work. It's not like in the way it would work with Evil Dead, for example. Here it's just so ridiculous. So, like I told you, expect to find creatures like Dwarvenstein. And I told you this doesn't appear in this book. There is no Dwarvenstein in this book, but there is another thing quite similar. And the first time I read it, I felt a bit like it really took me out of the book. It sounded so ridiculous. So you're going to be moving through these different scenes. There will be fights. There will be some puzzles, but not puzzles that you're going to solve exactly. Rather, you're going to get a modifier to see if you make it with that roll. There are some moments confronting some security devices. Like I told you, there are some weird fantasy elements, weird science elements, sorry, that you feel like you are making sense of things. In that way, you do feel like you are solving puzzles. But in other ways, it feels quite passive, that you just make your roll and you get a modifier. I think that the main villain is also quite lacking. I expected a more terrifying, imposing villain, but the way that they describe the villain, the way that the villain looks, and the way that, let's say, it dresses, it looks so a bit ridiculous again, or too quirky. So I think that for a lot of you that are expecting more of a serious horror experience, you're going to feel disappointed. There are some interactions with non-player characters, and by the end of the entire adventure I had mixed feelings, because I think there are some cool fight scenes. There are some encounters that are quite atmospheric. Some of them feel really like weird horror, eldritch horror sort of aesthetic to it, but in other cases it really takes you out of the adventure with some things that you thought, oh, those do not harmonize with the rest of the horror elements here. They either felt too ridiculous. I think the fantasy elements also took me out of the experience. The first part of the adventure, you start to play and you feel like you're playing Call of Cthulhu almost, and suddenly they bring out those fantasy elements and it creates a sort of displacement of theme. Now, a really cool thing about this adventure book is that you can use this as an adventure for any role-playing game. They give you tips and advice on how to make the relevant conversions. You also have a map of the entire zone that you are exploring. It definitely lends itself better to for a Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder sort of experience. If you want to play this with Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons, you can do that with any of the editions. Although, like I told you, this is more to be played with the Radiance campaign setting. I recommend that you check it out if you have a strong computer, like I told you, like a powerful computer that can load the PDF way faster than mine, because the PDF really needs to be optimized. I've opened some really graphic charged, or what would you say, really heavy PDFs with a lot of graphics and illustrations, and they all load quite fast, but with the Radiance PDF it's so slow. So overall, what do I think of Night Journey of the Soul? I really have mixed feelings, because, for example, even though that I think it's a decent adventure, a decent experience, I wouldn't want to play it again. And there are some really cool solo adventures out there. Almost any Tunnels and Trolls solo adventure, you really want to play it again several times. But with Night Journey of the Soul, I simply do not feel the need to play it, even though, and I think I got almost all of the objectives, pretty much all of the objectives, sorry, actually. So I don't see any reason for you to play this again. And the story is not that good, it's just barely decent. It feels so cliche at times. There are some nice surprises, but other times you were expecting everything. You played this scene and you're thinking, oh, this is probably what's going to come up next, and I had those moments. I also definitely think, like I told you, this is more like a solo experience, or at most 2 players playing this, because some of the background information doesn't add up with 2 people. It's supposed to be like a loner hero sort of affair. A lot of the encounters, they only have a description of what happens to a single player character, not 2 or more. So if you're going to play with 2 or more people, you will have to improvise and make it look or sound as if the encounter is referring to 2 investigators. You will have to decide on what things on the background of the main character are going to be divided between the 2 players, otherwise it's not going to make too much sense. So would I recommend this one? Maybe if you are looking for a an adventure to run with your group as a game master or dungeon master in a 1930s setting with some weird science devices and such, it could be worth it, but you will have to tweak several things of the adventure. I thought of so many things that should be modified, starting with the Dwarvenstein sort of situation that I told you. I would definitely remove that or change the name. So I would say that I barely recommend it. If you have some other let's say, for example, if you like playing Tunnels and Trolls, stick to playing Tunnels and Trolls. If you like to play an adventure book series that you already love, like the Destiny Quest series, I reviewed the Heart of Fire. I'm going to put the link in the description to that game book. If you have those, like your favorite series, stick to that series, or Fighting Fantasy as well, because Night Journey of the Soul, it's so quirky that I think only some players will like it. A lot of us will be left with a bit of a puzzled attitude as to whether you like it or not. So in my case, I don't have regrets when it comes to playing this adventure. Unlike Tunnels and Trolls adventure by another company, I'm going to put the link in the description below, which is one of the worst solo adventures I have played. It's not going to be like that. You know what? I think this one is on the level of the solo adventure that I reviewed for the Dark Eye. I'm also going to put a link in the description. There are some things that I liked, but some others that I disliked. I think that if someone were to tell me, you need to play one of these adventures again, the Dark Eye or this adventure, maybe I would play the Dark Eye just because you have a lot more options when it comes to making your way through the adventure site, or rather zone. In this case, most of the time you're going to be on rails. You only have a few choices later on. And when it comes to difficulty, Night Journey of the Soul is somewhat on the medium to easy spectrum. The first half, because you don't have too many ways to recover your health, you're going to be spending your health potions, and you'll start to think, oh, this is a really difficult adventure. But later on, there are going to be multiple scenarios or encounters in which you can recover your health. Sometimes your sanity, I think that just like as a tip, you should take care of your sanity a lot more than your vitality, because sometimes the wine, because you only have 6 uses and you do not have too many other options to recover your sanity, it's definitely the most precious resource in my opinion, compared to the 30 points of vitality. And so that's it. I hope you found this review informative. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been sending Right Through RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.